people screaming. It wasn't the shot you wanted, but it's a shot that hurts them.